Hello, hello, or welcome back to episode 200 of Leading Women in Tech. I never thought I'd be here. I never thought we'd be recording episode 200. When I started out, I naively thought, we'll do this. We'll see how we get on. Did I know we're going to be here 4 years later, episode 200? Hell no. So for those of you who have been with me along the way on this journey, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This has been a fabulous journey. We've actually only missed one episode at all in the last just under 4 years that we've been recording. And that was when my dad died, circumstances. I'm pretty damned impressed that we're here 4 years later. For those of you who have been with me along this journey, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. And so I wanted to do something a little bit special today. And one of the things that makes every single day special for me, one of the reasons why I get out of bed when I don't feel well, one of the reasons I do what I do is the women I get to work with. I get to work with some extraordinary women. I get to have the privilege of being in the room with women who challenge me, even though I'm their coach. My team get challenged by these extraordinary women. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, these women make my day every single day. They challenge me. They build me. They make me a better human. And at the same time, I'm lifting them up. So what I wanted to do for episode 200 was invite some of them onto the show. I would have had all of them, but I can't. I've got 3 amazing women to share with you today. Jen Peters, Allison Williams, and Lindsay Coulter. 3 women who I've had the honor to support through our programs. I've coached all of them, but I've not coached them all one-on-one. I thought that was an interesting adjustment for us to make since I last had a client on the show, because I now don't do all the coaching around here. I realized about a year, 18 months ago, if I want to change the world of tech by elevating women, I can't do this by myself. And there are so many great women out there who are in tech who want to be great coaches. And I was like, okay, we're going to start doing that. So I now train coaches who are all women in tech themselves. And some of them get to come and work for me. And honestly, part of the power of that is they have different experiences than I do. And so I love that in our programs, you now get not just my experience, but all of my coaches' experience. And so today I have invited Lindsay, Jen, and Allison onto the show to talk about why they sought out executive coaching, what it's done for them, where they're going, what they're doing. And honestly, I've just finished recording it, and these women made me cry. These women have made me chuckle, laugh out loud, smile. They have made me realize why we're doing what we're doing is still so incredibly important. We've still got a long road to go. I truly hope by the time I retire that I don't need to do this work, that there won't be a gender gap. But on the road we're on, there probably will be. But I'm hoping to change my little bit of the world by doing this as we do. So please welcome these Asia's show, be inspired by them, and follow in their footsteps, or just take a little bit of inspiration for what you could achieve. So without further ado, let's get them on the show. Welcome to the show, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 200. I'm so excited to share your journey with everybody out there listening to us.
Yeah, so exciting.
Yeah, we're excited. Thanks for having us.
Absolute pleasure. So what I'm going to do is ask some questions. I'm going to go one person at a time. And I want to hear the real, raw truth about your journey. So I am going to jump straight on into the questions. I'm going to ask Lindsay first, if that's okay with everybody. Lindsay, can you share with us your career journey, highlights, lowlights, and what you do today?
Yeah, so I'm going to take my career journey back to when I was in college and undergrad. I went to college for mathematics and computer science, and I was in a very stressed out state. I was the first of my family to go to college, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. No one was putting pressure on me except for myself, and I almost changed my major to ecology and evolutionary biology because I felt it was like fascinating to learn about, but I also enjoyed mathematics and computer science. And I mention this because I still spend a lot of time learning about evolutionary biology and ecology, and I believe that the concepts have actually been hugely valuable for me and my career as a software engineer and as a process engineer and an engineering leader, thinking about organizations as basically a system of ecology. I started my career as a QA engineer. I jumped around in different roles from DevOps to software to a process engineer and change agent for the entire engineering organization. Let's see, lowlights and highlights. I mentioned going back to my college days because I feel like I've always been trying to navigate like the stress of what do I want to do when I grow up? How do I want to move here? And I think the moments of stress have been super catalytic for my entire career, and have allowed me to kind of like stretch my role. And I mean, the process engineer role that I mentioned I was in for an engineering organization, I pitched to the VP of engineering for the organization so I could have a higher impact on exactly what an engineering culture could be for the company so that we could have bigger results. Lowlights, lots of moments of stress and inflection, burnout, which is actually great to talk about, like what we're going to talk about today, because I think I did a lot of self-coaching without realizing I was doing self-coaching. And I think a coach would have been instrumental to supporting me through those transitionary periods. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. I just want to call out a couple of things for listeners there, because I think that story is so powerful. One, like that you had multiple interests in college and you went the engineering route. And I think so many of us have been wondering, like, did I do the right thing by following the techie route, or did I do the right thing by taking this role? I could have taken this other non-techie role, which I'm very interested in as well. And sometimes we just need the confidence to just go all in on it. So I applaud you for doing that. I also think it's fabulous that you pitched a role to a boss fairly early in your career. I think that's something that I advocate all the time to clients, and I do not see us doing enough of. And you got success from that. The company got success from that. And yeah, we're going to come back to the burnout one. So thank you so much for sharing your story, Lindsay. Let's hop over to Jen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jen, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what you're doing, how you got to where you are on those highlights and lowlights.
Absolutely. So I think I'm going to follow a similar path that Lindsay did and just kind of go back to the beginning. So my undergrad degree is in criminal justice, of all things, but it's Bachelor's of Science. And so why that was even interesting to me was I just didn't want to do the same thing every day. Like the thought of going and doing the same thing every day was so unappealing to me. And I'm like, I thought, oh, well, this will be it. So anyway, get that degree. Some life happens, and then I'm like, well, maybe I'll go to grad school. So I go to grad school I get my master's degree in criminal justice. And, I'm really interested in like the data, what it shows, what's effective, all this. And so, but at the end of the day, I still needed to get a real job. And so this is like such a weird journey, but I started my career actually working for our state government, and I was a food stamp. I gave out food stamps and Medicare, and was like making $27,000 a year. But the cool part about that job, which I will always be thankful for, is I was a single parent, and that job was on the same street my kid went to school at. And so when you think about like a job path, wow, that like met a huge personal need for me, was to be able to still be a mom and be effective and not like have to feel like all those things, like, like I was failing. Hey, I could drop them off and go straight to work. So fast forward, got married, still working for the state, a couple different roles. And then I applied to be part of a leadership program that was for non-supervisory staff. And I thought, okay, well, this is great. And during that program, we would go to these different weekend retreats, and they had, well, not weekends because we didn't do that on the state dime. We went during the week because we only worked 37.5. So, but we went to, there was a speaker there from a local university, Lipscomb University, talking about their MBA program. And a friend of mine did it. And I was talking to her about like what her goals were. And I was like, wow, if I really want to be where I want to go, I have to do something different. And so that kind of like path that was laid out for me. And I even went to an executive who I very much respected and who was a good boss for me. And I said, can I go to these executive meetings? And she says, no, you don't have the skills. And I go, well, okay, if I want to go there, I have to change. And so back to grad school, finished my MBA in 2 years, the day after I graduated, started working for a global IT company in outsourcing. And I have such a heart. I love that. I love outsourcing. It was very interesting. Worked in as IT governance lead, did some stints with BPO work, and then went to lead a team of incident managers, which the irony in all this is I feel like if I could call myself something, it would be a reluctant technologist, because it was almost like I knew what these things were after I did them. Led an incident team at a global bank. What else did I do after that? Oh, went back and did more IT outsourcing, but this time working for, on the other side of the table, working for the client side. So managed millions of dollars in IT ops and, app dev, SRE stuff, which was really fascinating because I was able to take all of the things I learned previous jobs and now apply them in a way that I could actually add a lot of value to executive meetings. Many times I would be in a meeting with an SVP and they were expecting, oh, I'm going to have to run this meeting. And they did not have to do that. Like, I was educated enough. I knew what I was talking about. I understood all the dynamics to where I could take control of that meeting and, get the outcome that we needed. So that was a lot of fun. I had a most amazing boss there, but, like I kind of referred to at the beginning, I don't like to be bored. And that company was in transition, going through a big acquisition. And so I was recruited by an information security firm and went there. And it was really, I could say, interesting. I kind of look at that as my, like, where the burnout hit, where we go into this series of like self-coaching things where we're doing the best we can because we've got this innate ability to kind of see, as Lindsay pointed out, the system and the way things work, which is a great value to where we are and like where we sit in organizations. And I led a team and it was really interesting. But however, I left that job after some great coaching and it started the journey of entrepreneurship. And that has been, it's such an identity, and hopefully we can talk about some of that, but it's such a challenge to your identity when, especially I think as women, when we've been a director of X, Y, or Z, and we've held these 6-figure jobs where we've provided and we've done these great meetings. And then it's like, oh, wow, all of that goes away. Where does my value lie? Which was really probably the biggest thing I think Lula, when I found Tony, helped me with. So that was like, I guess that's been my journey so far where I'm at today. I do some consulting work in enterprise operations because, I once like very much think in terms of systems, and, that's why I think it's the data and being able to see the big picture has helped me be so successful, even without the technologist background. So I still don't know how to do SQL, but thank God for AI, right?
100%. It's made just change about. That's a whole other podcast episode for another day. There's definitely a common theme here about the burnout, and that's when at least several of you have come to work with me and my team in Lit Up Leadership Academy. So for listeners who are not in the know about what we do, Lula is what inside our program we affectionately call Lit Up Leadership Academy. So all the ladies on this show today have been or are currently in Lula, and it's such an honor to support you. So thank you, Jen, for your journey. We're totally coming back to the burnout and the entrepreneurship though in a little while. But Allison, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us about you and those all important lowlights and highlights.
Sure. So I'll glom on with everyone else and start at the beginning. I went to school for a degree in biology because I thought I wanted to be a doctor because I am a very nurturer human by nature. Like, that's how I show up for everything. Hated it, decided that wasn't going to work out, and decided I was going to do physics and math because logic also, please, logic, and less protozoa drawings. So I got my degree in physics and thought for sure I was going to become a meteorologist, went to go to get my graduate degree in atmospheric science, hated it. I spent a long time in the defensive contracting industry, which is very male dominant. And a lot of the challenges that I was facing while I continued to grow at those organizations were around my availability to support work in off hours. And as the mother of a young child, I didn't want to spend all of my off time at work. And a lot of the work I was doing was classified, so required me to be on site. I did not have the flexibility to be able to work in the periphery in the evenings once my child was going to bed. So I was either choosing to go to work to continue my career and to grow and to get where I wanted to be, or I was choosing to stay at home and potentially miss out on opportunities because my peers were males and didn't have the same constraints that I had. Some of the lows that I can reference are really around that desire to continue to grow my career and make those choices for my career while also trying to be there for my family. And ultimately, I had leaders who would say, can't you just stay here and, your husband do this? And my response to them was like, that's really interesting that's how that works at your home. My home, you might have a wife who does that for you. I'm the wife. I'm the mom. This is how I want to show up for my family and how I want to show up for my work. So being able to find a place where I could do both was beginning to become important to me. So that's when I segued from 17 years in the industry to doing consulting with a different company and having more flexibility and control over working while growing my career and showing up the way that I want to as a mother. The one thing I will also mention that I'm sure we'll circle back around to with respect to burnout is that desire to do all of the things for everyone and be there in that role of supporting other people's careers, other people's growth, making sure everyone else is taken care of, home, work, wherever. And at some point, it starts to take a toll on you as a person able to show up at home and at work. So that's kind of where I ended up showing up here and talking with Tony was how do I get to that next phase while continuing to be everything to everyone at all times.
Thank you, Allison, for sharing that. In particular, I had no idea that you studied maths and physics as well, like I did. So that's always fun. But isn't it fascinating that already with just asking the three of you to introduce yourself, we've seen some of the things I commonly hear from women. It's the tension of what should I study, why, and going into a tech career without a tech background like Jen did, moving sideways, and then also what Allison just really called out there is this double expectations of men have solved the family issues in this particular way, and they're like, well, why can't you do that? And it doesn't work for us. Many of the women I've worked with who have been super successful, who are a little bit more advanced in their careers, often they've had a partner who has had a less career ambitions of some description. But we're now in a situation where I really hope couples can all have great career ambitions and be passionate about all this stuff. So I think we're now in this era, we need to figure this out. So I'm glad we're having this conversation today. To move us on next, I want to pick on Jen first and ask you, when you joined this program, why did you join?
Oh, gosh.
What was your catalyst for joining?
I'm going to try not to cry.
Oh,
I know I already saw you. So before everybody jumped on and I got my little tear out of the way. I was at a point in the job I was in where I was definitely knew I was a square peg in a round hole. I had known that pretty much 3 days into when I started. However, it was a company I hadn't worked for this type of company before. And, I wanted to take a risk. I wasn't opposed to the risk. There were a bunch of things that happened and I got into a big conflict with my boss at the time. And there were things that were happening that I didn't feel lined up with who I was, with my own personal experience and expectations of what leadership is. But I knew what I was being shown wasn't what I felt was healthy leadership. And there was a lot of like change, and I won't go into any details, but I had gotten this message on LinkedIn from Tony Collis, and I'm like, oh, wow, all this stuff has just happened. Here I am, like struggling, hoping I don't like get fired. And it's like coaching. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me click that. And so I set up a call with Tony, and I kind of, really break down in like the first 5 minutes. And the thing that Tony, you said to me that I will never forget was, you should have done this for yourself yesterday. And that was like, because I needed to understand how to like show up for myself. I think that was one thing, Lindsay or Allison, like, you want to show up the way you want to show up. And if maybe you have the tools in you, you don't know how to do that. If it's not modeled to you, if it's not celebrated in the workplace, being a woman in any type of tech environment, you're surrounded by men who don't really care about that stuff sometimes. So it was like all these things. It was, I wanted to be able to show up and be able to handle myself in a way that aligned like with who I knew I was, and get tools. Like, I needed to understand how to show up in a meeting. I needed to understand how my own actions impacted the situation, and how I could, because at the end of the day, I was the only person that could control. No one else was controlling me except me. So I had so many, like, it was my responsibility to myself to be able to show up in a way that was powerful, that was healthy, that had boundaries. And so, all I needed Tony and her accent to say, you should have done this for yourself yesterday. And that's all I needed. Sign me up. And so that's how I found Lula. And it was probably one of the most impactful, I will say, probably one of the, if not the most impactful thing I've done for my career.
Oh, Jen, you're going to make me cry. You really are.
I did. You need someone to tell you. And I actually just heard this. I was listening to a coach on Instagram, and he said, your family and friends want the best for you, so they won't tell you the truth. And that's why you need a coach, and you need a therapist, is because you have to have people in your life that tell you the truth, but also like equip you to like, okay, go get that truth. Everything, Tony, you said to me, like, you should have done this for yourself yesterday. Absolutely. I just needed someone to tell me that, and someone to say, yeah, you actually do need this, instead of waiting on a boss, a mentor to say, well, you really need to get some coaching. This would be helpful. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I love it. I'm so glad I did it.
Thank you, Jen. Oh, thank you so much. I actually just this morning was talking to my team about how our job is not to make our clients feel better. Ultimately, that's absolutely what I want to do. But I was calling out one of my team who just kind of couldn't deal with a client crying in front of her and was just trying to make her feel better. And I was like, this client needed to cry. They needed to go through this tough moment. Part of what we do as coaches is provide space for the tough conversations, which are the game changers. And sometimes I will do that within the first few minutes of meeting somebody. And it's hard, but it's a genuine privilege to be able to have that position. Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for sharing that. Allison, I would love to know what prompted you to join? Why were you all in? And why are you still here in the program?
I think there are a lot of reasons why when you reached out, I was all in. A lot of it kind of overlaps with what Jen was saying about needing to make the space for yourself. Some of it is also in terms of, a lot of leading is truly, you do need to have those hard skills. You need to understand the technology, the engineering. You need to understand the products that are being built. You need kind of that basic understanding of programmatics. However, it's truly rooted in soft skills. And as a woman, I feel I have all of those soft skills, but I had a really hard time balancing when to not bring the soft skills. Like, as a woman, it feels as though we spend a lot of our time navigating societal, like, behavior expectations for how women are supposed to show up. And how do it's like an executive presence that's specific to a woman, is where I was having a little trouble like navigating, because I have the skill set. I have a general executive presence. I certainly have empathy, and I lead with like open authenticity. And at some point you have to be heard as well and taken seriously. And how do you tie all of those skills that you have together? And it is almost like a therapy session of, hey, I know this is the thing, but like, can you please help me figure out how to close it?
100%. One of the things I definitely see around here is how it's not just executive presence. It's, as you put it, executive presence for women. And it is different. We can't just follow the great examples of the men around us, because what works for men quite brutally doesn't work for us as women. We are held to a different standard. So I love that you call that out. I really do. And hopefully we'll get a bit of time to dive into that a little bit more. But Lindsay, over to you. Why did you join Lit Up Leadership Academy?
I think I just mentioned it briefly. I was trying to be short in my intro, but through various stages in my career, I've gone through like heightened levels of imposter syndrome, and I've worked through them with like my own, what I would now call self-coaching, but wasn't really. I would pick up a book and I would read an idea and like try to help myself like mentally overcome through mindset practices, stoicism, like leadership books, trying to understand, what's going on for me and thinking about new ideas on how I could solve those problems. Early last year, I think I've been in Lula for about 9 months, and I was also all in, as you said. Once I got started, I was going through a big transitional period for my career. I was moving into a director of engineering role. It was the first time I was managing managers and leaders in an organization. Being a part of a startup, I think like I am challenged all the time. My job is changing quite a bit, and I actually enjoy it. I think change is like great, but I was going also through, which I didn't realize at the time, I think some transitional periods outside of work as well. And so I wasn't aware that my self-doubt and imposter syndrome and how I was like leading other leaders was coming through because I didn't realize that it was related to also things outside of work. When I approached my manager at the time, he's an incredible leader. I have a very open dialogue with him. I told him I was dealing with like heightened levels of burnout at the moment due to like the self-reinforcing spiral of I can't do my job, like I don't know what I'm doing. And I think there was a lot in this for me from a reflection period. He reached out to his peer network and female leaders in tech, and one of them recommended a coaching program, which led me to meeting Tony. I scheduled a call with Tony, finding her website through my direct manager, and I think I also, crying my eyes out in the first meeting, just trying to like deal with the burnout that I was dealing with. Realizing that I might not be able to do my job, and like I think I was also crying again dealing with like those pressures of like, am I enough? And so I came on to Lula, started working with a coach immediately, realizing, and I think at the time I was also going through therapy, trying to figure out what was going on for myself, and it's been life-changing. I reflected a lot on the situation that I was going through, and it's been, I have so much more resilience and strength for myself, like focusing on like practices that can help me, like remember and see like the value that I'm creating and like celebrating it. And so through Lula now, I'm all in still because I'm learning all the time, like how to improve my skills. And I think, the biggest area being like my leadership confidence to continue to push through those challenges that I think I'm excited about, that move my career forward, that allow me to do skill development. Like without confidence in my own leadership, I don't know that I'd be able to, push through the things that I need to push through for. And it's exciting. It's like a whole new, once you get past these mental barriers, I feel like it's like, a light bulb goes off and you get excited about the challenge and not necessarily like overwhelmed by the challenge. But part of that is, what I've learned through Lula is like really treating yourself as a whole person, which is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, ladies, thank you so much for sharing all of those stories about why you're here. If aside from anything else, I hope it inspires listeners to understand like there's no one reason for joining this program. There's no one reason for having coaching. There's no one reason for working on your career. I do want to shift gears a little bit now and ask, what would you say is the main thing so far? I know some of you are still working with us, Lindsay, Allison. What is the main thing that, like the main success you've had in this program? In particular, Jen is a little bit unusual in that some might suggest that you were the wrong person to bring onto this show, because what we ended up doing with you, Jen, is we coached you out. I say we. Part of your conversations with us made you realize that actually working for somebody else wasn't for you, and you've left corporate tech to start off on your own, which I think some people might be like, wait, hold on, how's that achieved Tony's mission of advancing women in tech? And my view is I can only do that if I support each individual woman as I want. So I'd love to hear, like, what is, for each of you, what is the main thing that you feel you've had out of the program to date? Let's start with Allison.
Most definitely what we've been working on the most for me is my company's been going through a huge merger and acquisition, and the amount of change that has been incurred that I've had to lead a team through has been vast. So one of the biggest things that I believe I learned through a book that was recommended by my coach is actually leveraging those things that I'm really strong at, which are compassion, communication, and clarity. Like those are the keys to leading through change, and to really lean into those things that I'm actually quite good at there. And all the while, you can become completely exhausted by the compassion piece if there isn't enough clarity for you to provide the communication, like how those things tie together, and then how to then take care of myself and set boundaries. And one of the things that I love in this program is the whole like notice, pause, reframe. And I have to do that quite a bit to only just like protect myself so that I can lead through change following kind of those other 3 C's. So those have been the big focus items for me, and I think have spilled out across into just kind of how I show up as a leader for my team.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's so powerful. Because part of what makes us great leaders is leading into our strengths and then developing our shadow side. But I love the fact that you've realized that some of your innate strengths are actually the best way to operate. And it's then, as you say, not being exhausted by that compassion. I always say like true empathy is knowing how to leave your compassion at the door. You're compassionate while you're in the room, but you don't take it with you. There was an episode, I think it's already gone out. I think it went out a couple of weeks ago, called Hold, Don't Carry, where I interviewed a friend of mine who's also a coach. And we talked about holding that empathy in the room, but not carrying it with us when we leave. Because that's the hard bit. You can be super compassionate, super empathetic, but the hard bit is not allowing it to sit with you and hold you back in your next conversation, your next meeting, or at home. So thank you, Allison, for sharing that. Lindsay, what about you? What's your biggest outcome so far?
Oh man, there's so many things that I learned from Lula. I think you've quoted this, Tony. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much to take in. But I think the thing that has stuck with me the most is just aside from like gentle nudges of like celebration and ensuring that I'm like, taking a moment to celebrate what I've done instead of thinking about like what I could do better. As engineers, I'm always focused on like continuous improvement, and taking that reminder of like pausing on what's working well is so valuable for you as a leader. And then also, especially dealing with confidence issues, but then also like supporting an entire organization to kind of make sure that you're squeezing the good you're kind of reinforcing the good things, not necessarily always thinking about what we can do to improve. I think the biggest thing that has stuck with me that I always come back to when I'm kind of dealing with these like these little spirals of doubt, and they do come up, like they will, it's kind of natural. And I think I get to explore with my coach, like why it's showing up for me in that situation, which allows me to do some more reflection on, you know, who I am and what actually like I need from my career, from my environment, how I can show up for it. I think the thing that has stuck with me the most is within what Tony calls the Sparkle Plan, really figuring out like what drives me, and the concept of work and life coherence. Like, how do I think about my life? How do I think about work? And how can I help overlap the things that are super important and valuable to me that I need in the environment that I'm in, so that I can flourish and do my best work and show up in the way that I want to, and bring energy into the world instead of like pull it out. So that is something that has stuck with me, I think, the most.
Having that coherence between who you are, what you do, and how you show up, the role you have, the company you work for, the activities you do on a daily basis, making sure everything lines up. That's game changing for our mental health, for our enjoyment, for our success, for our ability to show up on the tough days and our success on the good days. It is life changing. And yeah, I do it in some way where people don't talk about it. It's almost like we're supposed to battle through. I don't think work should be a battle at all. So thank you. That's beautiful, Lindsay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jen.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I like
Jen,
taking notes.
over to you.
I'm taking notes. So I'd like, you know, I guess I could kind of like sum this up into like big takeaways. The number one thing, you know, you kind of mentioned, you guys coached me out of a corporate role, and the reason that was so significant wasn't that the corporate environment necessarily wasn't the right fit. It was me finding myself in jobs that like I really didn't really want to do. This particular job I really didn't want to have. But like, why was that continuing to happen? So it was more like becoming comfortable enough in like my identity of like, and like how that professional identity and personal identity met, like being comfortable enough to be like, okay, actually this isn't what I want. And I'm okay with that. Like, I accept that this is not who I am. You know, I mentioned I didn't like doing the same thing every day. Well, guess what? That means I don't do BAU well. Like I don't like BAU tasks. So that if that, I am not your girl for that. However, if you need me to look at a system and see the parts and see how this works and that works, I am that person for you. And realizing like, even though the job I had didn't let me do that, like it wasn't all a loss. Like I learned some great things, but it was becoming comfortable enough in my identity to be able to say, this isn't enough for me. This doesn't work. I don't have to have the golden handcuffs. I can take a risk and step out. And that was really significant. Mm-hmm. It was very challenging though, because, you know, we have a lot of identity built up in work. And the other part was, you know, and I think this is the Sparkle Plan, you know, when we have that, what is that big dream you have for yourself that feels really big? And I think a lot of time as women, we don't have those big dreams because we have, oh, well, I have to cook dinner tonight. You know, my biggest concern is who's going to pick my kids up? How many games do we have? Do I even have time to do X, Y, or Z? And so it was like really dreaming big and like coming out of corporate and like starting a business. You know, when I started it, it had this like really cute name. I'll say cute. It didn't have a name that was scalable. And it was like, it took me about 6 months to realize you haven't set this to scale. And so then it was like this pivot of, okay, how do you change everything that you're doing to set to scale if that's where you want to go? But like, I hadn't even given myself permission to do that. And so it's that continual process of diving into those big ideas and not being afraid of them, you know, and not being afraid to get yourself there, right? Even if I never did, like the fact that I was willing to take the risk to get myself there or to set myself up to go there, to me was like a big deal. That Sparkle Plan, it was very hard. It was very hard.
A Sparkle Plan is hard. And we call it the Sparkle Plan. For the uninitiated, our Sparkle planning process is the way we help our clients figure out how to sparkle. And it's hard because you got to get to know yourself, right? I don't know anybody who's like, oh, that was easy.
Yeah, definitely difficult,
Yeah.
but worth it.
Yeah. I do think the most powerful work that we do in coaching is the really uncomfortable stuff, the stuff that is digging below the surface and getting to know ourselves. On that note, I would love to know from each of you, like a quick answer on this one. You're all role models to our listeners because you're all leaders. You've all done your own thing. You've all got comfortable in your own skin. You've all dealt with burnout. So I'd love to know, what is the one thing you wish you'd known 10 years ago about yourself? Anybody want to go first on this one? Just pipe on up.
I think for me, I have a sticky note that sits right in front of me now that says never confuse kindness for weakness. And it's a reminder for myself that I can always show up kind, which is who I am. And that it doesn't necessarily mean that I am weak in that kindness. So I still can show up with a very strong opinion and be kind. And I definitely have learned that much later in my career. I wish I had known that I had the power to be strong and kind earlier in my career.
That's beautiful, Allison. I wish I'd learned that one earlier in my career as well. And it doesn't stop you being tough either. I think kindness doesn't stop you being tough. Lindsay, what about you?
For me, I think it's so hard to point back, but I think the thing that I think I would tell my younger self in my career is to not be afraid of pushing past, I think, the barriers or boundaries, the limiting buckets that people kind of can place naturally, or myself personally can place on what an engineer looks like.
100%. Actually, that's a really interesting one. I feel like we want to dig into that, which we don't have time for, because I've never met two engineers the same, and they all have their own different take on what engineering is. So it's an interesting one. Jen, what about you? What do you wish you'd known 10 years ago?
Watch who you're looking for validation from and why. I wish I would have learned that a little sooner, because you repeat the same patterns. And there's a theme. And so I think it's really important that we really, have just kind of take a step and be and really question, who am I really looking for validation from in this, and why? Does this person represent someone in my life? And I think I could have avoided a lot of heartache and a lot of hard times. And maybe if I would have known why that was happening sooner rather than later. Now looking back, I can see how I did that, and I wish I could have avoided some of it. I mean, everything is used we learn from everything. So, but I think telling younger Jen, hey, really, when you are looking for approval or validation, ask yourself why from that person. And so that's what I would tell myself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I'm going to use that one today,
ladies,
Jen.
this is so
that's
beautiful.
A good one.
Thank you so much. So much for sharing those. So incredibly powerful. Thank you. What I would love to ask you as a final question before we move to the quickfire round is, if somebody listening is thinking about having an executive coach, whether it's this program or something else, what do they need to hear to help them make the decision whether or not now is the time? Lindsay, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think my advice would be just to try it out. Use it as a learning opportunity. It is powerful in very quick ways for you, and understanding whether or not coaching should be a part of your career. I think the only way to know is by actually leaning in and trying it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Allison, what about you?
I think if you're considering coaching, then you should do the coaching. You're at a point in your career where you're thinking about where you would go next, and you truly can't go wrong by bringing a coach into it. And if nothing else, it helps you to hear yourself even better and the things that you're saying.
Thank you. And Jen, what about you?
Do it. Do not wait for, if the opportunity comes across your plate, and you get to have a call with someone like Tony or any of the great coaches that are on her team, do it. Do not wait on a boss to say you need it. Do not wait on your company to pay for it. In fact, I paid for all of mine out of pocket. I told the CEO at the time I was getting executive coaching. He did not care. It was not important to him that I'd taken those steps. So the reality is you do it for you. You should have already done it. So if you're listening and you're thinking, do I need a coach? The answer is yes. And it will be a transform. It will be a journey that you're going to go on where you will become you're going to just show up for yourself. And if that's all you ever got out of it was showing up for yourself in a different way, then it's 100%. That's amazing for you, because the goal is for you to become a powerful person. And how do you do that if you don't put yourself in a situation that empowers you to become powerful? So do it.
Oh, thank you, ladies. Okay, let's move on to quickfire round. Otherwise, I will talk about this all day with you all. So we're just gonna go. I don't know what order we're gonna go in. Quick answer to the question: what is the worst piece of advice you've ever been given? Let's go, Lindsay first.
I'll try to keep this quick. The worst advice that I was ever given was just do your job. I think it was well-intentioned. I think the person was trying to help me build resilience in a vulnerable time. And I think it was clear that I was overwhelmed, and they were trying to help me figure out like how to not make things worse or harder than they are. But my job as a leader, and many jobs as leaders is you figure out what your job is. You are defining the job. The job is not told to you. And so like my way of doing that is very different than any other leaders. And telling me to just do my job was already what I felt I was doing. Maybe just not doing it with grace.
Oh, yes, 100%. Oh my goodness. Every single one of those best pieces of advice that are well-intentioned can become so toxic if we're not careful and turn in that worst piece. Jen, what about you? Worst piece of advice?
Trust us. We're like family.
Oh, no.
Obviously, you didn't listen to that. But obviously, that was like red flag, right? But that was probably like the worst piece. And I was like, no, you don't. But just to like, that's my cheeky answer. But to really, I can kind of say, like Lindsay kind of said, my dad has been a really advocate. He has his doctorate degree, has always advocated for me to go to school, don't be dependent on a man, get educated, blah, blah, blah. Like my grandfather had his PhD. So it wasn't like we're first generation in school. But I will say, as I started to move through careers and I started to go from this pay grade to this pay grade, he would say things to me like, oh, well, you've got a good gig going on. You get paid, blah, 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 blah. You don't have to do much. And it was that good. And it was his intention was like, he didn't want to see me take a risk that put me in a situation that was too hard or whatever. So it was well-meaning. But at the end of the day, if I wouldn't have taken those risks, then I wouldn't have made more money than my engineer husband made for years, right? Like I would not have gotten to where I was and in a position to need Lula, but I would never have gotten to where I was and showed, because you said, like you said, we're role models to the people that listen to this. We're also role models in our families. We're showing our kids, what does hard work look like? What does it look like to sacrifice my kids saw me miss weekends to get an MBA. They saw me stressed out leading executive calls on the weekends in incident management, trying to like say a server needs to be rebooted. They saw all that stuff and it did make a difference. And so anyway, I went on a rabbit trail there, but people are well-intentioned, but you still have to like do what's right for you and your career and don't be apologetic about it. And my dad's great. But it came from a place of fear and risk. And love. Yeah. It wasn't like I want to hold you back. It was more, I really do believe his fear and was from a place of love.
Yeah. I genuinely think all the stories I hear on this show about worst pieces of advice, I doubt any of them have been malicious. I think all of it comes with good intentions. It's just very misplaced. Allison, what about you?
I'm not sure it counts as advice, but I was once in a session hearing about how to shape our careers, and the woman who was leading it was a VP, and she was talking about how you can't rely on anyone else to help you. And we, the women who are now VPs and have made it, had to claw our way through the ranks to the top, and you should have to do that too. And it always stuck out to me as just like, what a horrible way to feel like you have to be alone in this. If we're blazing trails, why not take others with us and share those learnings and kind of help us to each all move mountains as we make change for others? Like, why limit the change that we create to ourselves? But it always stood out to me as like, what a weird thing to say.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you on that one. I mean, it's why we do what we do around here. I'm on a mission to elevate women, and all of you have a duty in my mind to take other women with you as you do it. We're the privileged ones who have found this wonderful world of coaching and leadership development, but there are so many that need us. So thank you. Okay, last question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Let's start with Jen this time.
Lead yourself first.
Oh, tell me a little bit more. I know I quick fire, but tell me a little bit more about that. What does it mean? Just very quickly.
Yeah. So to me, I was actually at the Miss America. This was 10 plus years ago. I was at this leadership academy thing, and I was complaining about my boss at the time. And he looked at me, he goes, well, you just need to lead yourself first. And I thought, oh, well, I'm not doing what I need to do. And it has always, and that's translated in different ways over the years, but mainly to me, it means is like, if something's not happening, am I modeling that behavior myself? Like, am I modeling what boundaries look like? Am I modeling what showing up executively looks like? Am I modeling this? Like, no one else does it for me. And I have to choose that for myself first before I can ever want that or be able to impact someone else's life. I have to want those things and be doing those things. Like, if you don't show up with integrity, how do you expect everybody else to? Right? And how do you hold your team accountable to things that you won't even hold yourself to? And it's just always been that thing of, as a leader, what you do, what you say matters, how you do it, how you say it matters. And if there's something you want from someone, are you even able to do that yourself? So it's been an anchor.
Oh, 100%. Thank you. I love that one. Allison, what about you? Best piece of advice?
Be curious. I think the best way to, ever since hearing that, the best way to show up in any conversation is with curiosity. It can drive you to empathy and compassion. It can also allow you to actually listen instead of just hearing and hoping that you'll come up with a good response, but actually like listen to understand. So I think just be curious in every aspect of what you do each day is a big, big one for me.
Can I change my answer, Tony?
Be curious. You can totally change your answer, but we're keeping both of them in this edit.
No, I mean, I think it's
Go
so
for it,
true.
Jen.
I think it's so true. Like, you do lead yourself first, and then you're curious about all the things. So I don't know. I'm going to go 50-50.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap with what you were talking about, Jen, for sure.
Go for it, Lindsay.
Okay, so for me, it's not really like one statement here, but this is related to like kind of what everyone's talking about, sense of self and answering like the question, who am I? I think the best advice that I've ever gotten, and it's from like a couple different conglomerate of things, is to continue to reflect on and break like the identities, the labels, the beliefs that are placed on me or that I place on myself that limit me, so that and also that don't empower me to adapt and navigate new challenges. And so I've, over many new challenges in career, have like come to realizing, oh, I thought I identified with this thing, but that actually is no longer serving me. And so now I am no longer that. And so I've definitely think that this is like identifying with things that are catalysts to help you grow and overcome challenges, I think is ideal. Like, you're a learner. Personally, I am a learner. I feel that I believe in that. But there are other things in the past that I've, definitely realized this is no longer who I am, because I don't think it serves me anymore.
That is really beautiful. I mean, partly I love the word catalyst. I personally view that every single one of us is our own opportunity catalyst. We have the opportunities out there to change our lives. And it's, as you say, those catalysts and things that help us grow, overcome, evolve. Being curious as you do that is part of the joy of being a great leader, and part of what gets you through those opportunities as well. Ladies, this has been incredible. We haven't even really talked about burnout, which I actually wanted to, but we are definitely out of time here. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope listeners have found power in this conversation. The ladies on this show today, their LinkedIn profiles will be in the show notes. So if you'd like to connect with one of these ladies, do reach out. Jen, Lindsay, Allison, you are incredible. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for, one, being on this show, but two, working with me, working with my team, and helping to advance women in tech. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Remember, listeners, stay on your tech leadership game, follow your dreams, because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.